Hello and welcome to another episode of All Politics is Local. We have a new set design in here thanks to R.J. Sheedy, my new producer, who has been instrumental in getting me back in the studio. And as usual, we have another great show planned for you tonight. With me in the studio is State Representative Brian Murray, representing the
10th Worcester District.
10th Worcester District. Yeah. Brian, thank you so much for coming on in and being here today. I really appreciate you being here. Inaugurating our new set.
Yes, I didn't realize that this honor would be bestowed upon me, so I'm very pleased to be here. The table, I can tell it's brand new. There's no gouge marks in it from frustrated guests.
Not yet, but you know,
and we'll keep it that way today. Yeah.
We hope.
Yeah.
So tell us, what's new and exciting out on Beacon Hill? How did everything go at the end of the session and all that good stuff?
The end of the session was very, very hectic, and of course, as you know, this was my first term. So the legislative term is actually a 2-year cycle. Every 2 years is a new term. So it ended formally on July 31st. We're still meeting an informal session, but June and July were very, very hectic months. There were a number of bills that all kinds of folks wanted to get passed and so forth. Tremendous amount of interest groups. So it's difficult because of the process. You know, if a bill comes out of the House and if the same bill comes out of the Senate, but if there are variations in that bill, then it has to go to conference committee and then come back to both bodies before it goes to the governor, which a number of large bills did. So we were there for a number of evenings. It generally was till about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And then the last day, July 31st, we didn't adjourn till 1:15 in the morning.
Well, at least you beat the traffic home, though.
That was okay. When you get out at 8, 9 o'clock, they're doing the night construction.
Yeah.
You know, I thought I was going to get a bargain with the ride home, and all of a sudden the Pike is one lane.
Sure.
You know,
and again, you're wishing you had a helicopter. So.
Yeah, you know, so that was okay, but. And of course, you're going straight through, you know, so you get in there at 10 in the morning and it just goes straight through, and you're hopping around from session to your office, to roll call votes. When they call it, you have 3 minutes to get there.
Yep.
Fortunately, my office is pretty close to the chamber, so I can get down there pretty quickly and, you know, get that vote in there. But it was quite a learning experience, the active formal session. Like I said, the end was very, very hectic. Stuff was coming at you fast and furious, and you just had to deal with it as best you could.
Yeah, well, you did deliver some stuff for the local constituents here. Let's talk a little bit about what you got through at the end of the session.
Early on, as you know, the town of Milford in particular was involved and still is involved in the $63 million purchase of the Milford Water Company.
Right.
There were 3 specific bills that I needed to get signed into law to allow that process to occur. One of them was the appointment of water commissioners. The second one was to actually allow the transfer of the assets of the water company to be exchanged, to be transferred to the town of Milford. And the third was a discretionary one that the town wanted, and that was the ability to borrow over 40 years as opposed to the statutorily required 30 years, which would, you know, stretch out the payments, reduce the amount of payment, the amount of a yearly payment, which would give the town some discretion in terms of how to use that funds, whether or not to invest them into the water company or to use it to keep rates low for the ratepayers. So those came on through the special town meeting after October. And it was a process for me to get that passed through the various committees in the House. I'm fortunate because I was a member of the Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government, so those bills all went to that committee.
Okay.
I have a nice relationship with the chairs of that committee, and they accorded me very quick hearings and approvals out of that committee very quickly. From there, I think it went on to steering. There might have been Ways and Means. I know there were 1 or 2 other committee stops before it got to third reading. We got them through third reading, and of course the full House passed them. They then went over to the Senate side. Senator Fatman worked on it on that side. We got approval from the Senate, and all 3 of them were signed into law by the governor. I want to say before the end of last year.
Okay.
It might have been into January or February, but in any event, those are all in place. And the asset exchange was particularly, I don't want to say difficult, but tricky.
Tricky.
Yeah, in the sense that it was governed by statute. I worked with House Counsel on that. I worked with Town Counsel Jerry Moody. And what we had to do was actually funnel that through the Secretary of State's office.
Oh, really?
So there was a petition process that had to go to the Secretary of State's office. There was a service on the selectmen, which I had to arrange. And there was also a legal publication that was required in the Milford Daily News. So being an attorney, and the statute was very vague. It's not like it was, mapped out for you. It just, had some basic requirements. But being an attorney and dealing with the state work, it was similar to the type of work that I do on the state when people pass away in terms of citations, publications, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I was able to draft those documents myself and actually, have that arranged and go through. And when I went to the Director of Corporations at the Secretary of State's office, the woman said, "My goodness, this is the best one I've ever seen of these." I said, "Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that."
Sure, nice feather in your cap.
Yeah, so that was nice. So it was a learning process.
No doubt.
It was a learning process, and fortunately went through smoothly. So those are in place, and they're necessary for the town to take the next steps going forward. Things have changed a little bit since I was on the selectmen. The negotiations have changed a little bit. So now the board is going through the DPU. Ultimately, there'll be a determination of price and terms and that sort of thing. But once that gets resolved, the legal mechanism to allow it to go forward is in place. Mm-hmm. And I was glad to be able to get that done early on because at the end of the session, a lot of reps were kind of really, scrambling a little bit to get their local bills through. Mm-hmm. And of course, mine were done, so I felt
good for you.
Comfortable about that.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
So you also delivered quite a few budget earmarks for all the towns that you represent. You represent 4 towns, right? A piece of Medway,
right.
All of Milford, all of Mendon, and all of Hopedale?
Right. It's Precinct 1 in Medway. So I work with Representative Roy and Senator Karen Spilka with Medway. They received a number of budget line items this year. And last year and this year, I was able to get $50,000 for the what we would call the opioid task force in Milford, which is kind of unique in terms of what's going on in the state, in that we've got that relationship, that partnership between the Milford Police and also community impact. Mm-hmm. So that when there is an overdose, when there is that kind of a situation, the counselor is right there with the police officer, whatever kind of needs the person wants, whether it's medical, counseling, inpatient, sobriety house, whatever it is, they can facilitate it right away. And it's been very successful, and it's branching out to other communities now.
Good.
So as I talked to some of my colleagues in the House, they were very interested and impressed with that because not all communities are doing that. Mm-hmm. So one of my goals, hopefully if I'm reelected for the next term, is to kind of build on that and maybe file a formalized bill and a grant program to allow that to expand more easily. Mm-hmm. So we're not trying to deal with budget earmarks, cycle to cycle
type of
cycle
thing.
To cycle.
Make it easily repeatable. If you have something that works.
Right, and get that model out to other communities, to allow them to do it. Because, pockets of communities are handling these things in different ways. And when I go off to the Metro West delegation and I talk to the folks from SMOC, they're like, oh goodness, no. The counselor does not want to be with the police. You do not want to get in someone's face at the hospital. You want to let them think about things and deal with that. And I said, I beg to differ because we've been doing it in Milford a lot differently, and community impact feels that that's the most important time to make the contact with the person, right when they're in the throes of trying to combat it. I think when they get out of it and they start feeling good, the chances are they're going to go back to using again. So community impact, in Milford has approached it a little bit differently than some of the other communities, and I think that we've had more success than some of the other communities. So that was a very, I think, important earmark to get, and I got it both years. Last year, The town of Mendon is looking to expand their police department. Actually, I should say build a new one. And I was able to get an earmark of $50,000, which they're using for engineering costs, soil testing, all of the preliminary work.
Sure.
Very, very important to that community.
That's over on Providence Road, is it, where they were going to build that? Where was
well,
that?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yes, that was the target, but I think what they found is they've got some issues with the soil. You know, so I think the idea is to do it around the town hall area, you know, where that, you know, old station is and the fire station and that type of thing. But I think they've got some soil problems, so now they've got to kind of rethink their plans in terms of the design of the building, not go 2 stories or something like that. Sure. But it's been, you know, an important, you know, piece for them. And this year, you know, similarly in Mendon, the senior center is looking to expand. And they had no resources at all, so I was able to get a $50,000 earmark to allow that, you know, to go forward, and that's going to be in process. And on, you know, both of these, and even the $150,000 that went in this year's budget for the downtown revitalization in Milford, Senator Ryan Fatman was very, very helpful, helping, you know, steering those through the Senate and, you know, getting them both approved in the budget. And then, of course, the governor vetoed some of these, but we were able to override those vetoes.
Oh, good.
And Hopedale, I did not have success last year with their police department to try to get funding, but this year I did. And I was able to get $20,000 for an upgrade of their equipment. I'm not sure if they're going to use that for whatever equipment needs they have for tactical gear or situation awareness, or whether it's equipment, technological in the office. But they have $20,000, and it's very wide discretion in terms of how they want to spend those funds.
Good.
So I know that that's very important, and that's, you know, something that I was able to build on from last year to get into this year. Because one of the things that I've learned, whether it's an earmark or a bill or whatever, oftentimes it doesn't fly the first cycle.
The first effort.
It you know, it kind of has a lifespan, and sometimes it has to hit 1, 2, maybe 3 cycles before you can get an approval on it.
Sure, and we're actually going through that right now with a bill that I asked you for. My rolling coal legislation, which I love to bring up every time I see you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the problem with that was it was a late file bill, so it really didn't get the attention that, you know, all of the other bills did.
Well, let's just take a minute to explain to my listeners what rolling coal is all about. Rolling coal is a practice where if you have a diesel-powered pickup truck, you can actually modify it to have larger fuel injectors, and so on demand you can pour extra fuel into your engine, which causes thick clouds of black smoke to come out of your smokestacks. And some people do this because they think it's funny to blast thick black smoke at, say, Honda Accords that are powered by electricity, or Toyota Priuses. They put bumper stickers on that say Prius repellent, and they think they're being funny. Someone did it to me. I drive a little Chevy Cruze. I don't know. It's a gas-powered car. It's not electric. I don't know why they did it to me. His license plate, I know it in my head because his license plate said EPA, LOL. And I thought that was just kind of really, you know, he's laughing at me. I work in the solar power industry. And when he blows that black smoke, he's undoing what I do for my living. And that really kind of, you know, set me off a little bit. And I started calling around, what can I do?
I mean, I'm glad you brought it to my attention. I didn't even know that was a thing. You know, but you gave me a lot of information on it, so we put together a statute. I had House Counsel review it. I put together a bill, proposed statute, and we filed that. But like I said, it was filed late, so it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get a late bill
And you didn't include my solar-powered electric chair as a penalty. I was really kind of disappointed in that. But I suppose, you know, that might have been a little extreme. I can.
We wanted to try to reach consensus on this, so that might be a little difficult for, you know, some folks to buy into. But I mean, that's a prime example. So now, you know, again, hopefully if I'm reelected, that's going to be one of the first bills that I file. So coming out of the chute in January,
Then it'll have a whole cycle.
Well, yeah, and we'll provide notice to all of the reps and senators, say, look, this is something you really need to sign on to. It's an environmental protection bill. It's very important to the environment, and we'll get support for it, I know. And it'll have a public hearing, which I hope you come in
absolutely.
and
I'd be happy to come in
for.
and testify for it, absolutely.
Yes, and and then it'll go on from there.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm optimistic about that in the next session.
Awesome, awesome.
That's great.
What other stuff? You had some major bills come out of the
well,
session
the legislature itself. I mean, if you go back, I mean, the first major thing beyond the budget that we had to try to take care of was the marijuana bylaw. I mean, that was passed through the referendum process.
Yep.
And the legislature got a lot of feedback from municipalities, public safety groups, and medical groups of a lot of problems that were in that bylaw. And basically it had to be rewritten to provide some safeguards in these particular areas, and it was eventually done, and now you're seeing that process going forward, and that's going to be a big part of the economy. This past couple of months, I would say, towards the end of the session, there was a rush with some major bills. There was I think it was a $500 million life sciences bond bill, which was put forth by the administration. And I had a chance to hear the testimony on that because I'm on the Committee for Economic Development and Emerging Technologies. We had a hearing for the better part of a day up at UMass Medical School, and it's just amazing to hear what's available in that. Funds targeted to go off to the life sciences to try to support and encourage, that kind of advanced manufacturing, that kind of medical biotech industry to come, funds to partner with community colleges and Voc schools to really increase our training and our education.
Sure, people who can work in clean rooms and all the stuff that's necessary for that kind of stuff.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, some real technical, and then also some funds to really do some brick and mortar work,
right.
To really support some of these businesses. So that's a major bill that's been done. We did also, just most recently, and the governor signed, I think it was $1 billion economic development bill that, primarily, I'm sure you've heard the mass workforce. So they will go out, they can provide grants, low interest loans or bonds to companies that want to expand or even open up. And it's similar to the life sciences in the sense that there is a component to match up for your education and your training, and there's also a component to deal with some actual infrastructure needs and that type of stuff. So that's the kind of benefit that really should help out the economy, create new jobs, allow our Commonwealth to grow. We had the opioid bill that was submitted by the governor. That passed and got into law, which is going to bring some specific treatment right into the emergency rooms, and also made some adjustments with prescription drugs, made Narcan available more readily to everyone. Again, building on things that were done in the past, but still trying to address this opioid epidemic, which is still a huge problem.
Oh, sure.
And address it in a comprehensive way.
I've lost 2 friends to opioids in the last year.
It's awful.
I'm very active in town. I do a lot of things. I play darts at the Turtle Tavern.
Sure.
One of my team members.
It's a shame.
Lost him.
It's a shame.
Just one day he's there, one day he's gone.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. It knows no boundaries.
Yeah.
Age, sex, race, it doesn't discriminate.
Yeah, demographic boundaries, nothing. Yeah.
Nothing. I mean, it just cuts across everywhere, and it was, a big start of it was the prescription drugs, the oxycodone, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then unfortunately, when folks, get hooked on these things, which are extremely addictive, then they can't afford them or can't get the pills, but they can get the heroin.
Right.
And then, of course, the fentanyl, which gets pushed out on the street, is just an absolute killer.
Yeah, yeah.
And
it's like way more powerful than heroin.
Yes.
And when used combined,
yes.
It's virtually a death sentence.
It is. Yeah. It is. So that's something that, we've experienced very hard here in the community, like we talked about previously. I think our police department is ahead of the curve on it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it's a big curve and it's a huge problem.
Yep.
But I think that we've got greater success than a lot of communities on it. So this bill will hopefully, help on a broader scheme in terms of some of the treatment measures and also some of the drugs to counteract that.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the energy bill that came out of
this.
The Senate passed an energy bill, and I just absolutely fell in love with it because I'm an idealist, and I loved that bill. The House, unfortunately, didn't take up all of what the Senate did. You did pass a good energy bill. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened. Senator Mark Pacheco out of Taunton, I believe.
Mm-hmm. He's a real leader on climate in this.
He is.
He really is. I like Mark a lot.
Yes. So he was the leader on that bill, and it was very broad-based. I think it probably had virtually everything in there that some of the environmental groups consider very, very important. Mm-hmm. The House chose to tackle it a little bit differently. It cobbled together, I think, 3 or 4 different bills.
Right.
And got those in kind of a segmented fashion. I was part of a coalition of House representatives that urged leadership to try to increase the RPS to 3%, remove the solar cap.
Yeah, the net metering cap.
The net metering, and there was one other provision I can't remember. There were 3 things that we were looking to try to get our bills to match up to what the Senate bill, and still not even go as far as the Senate bill did. Ultimately, the consensus was for the bills that came out of the House. The RPS does increase, but not as much as.
Right, not as dramatically.
Not as much as what folks had wanted.
But I believe they also built in a review a couple of years from now to see how's it going, or should we bump it?
I think what year? 2025, I believe.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think it's going to go till 2025, and then it goes back to the 1%. And the idea on that was that that's the point to revisit it,
sure.
See where things are at, and see if we can increase it at that point.
See if we can make it better then. Yeah. Remains to be seen what'll happen.
Personally,
right?
That would not have been my choice.
Uh-huh.
But on any type of a bill like this, there are so many different interest groups and so many different advocates. It's all pulling in different directions.
Sure.
So obviously you've got folks who are very interested in environmental issues and they would like to see it a certain way. You have industry officials that see it differently and see cost and expense and changeover and really don't want to, change things. You have folks on the conservative end that's, really don't want to see anything change and think that, some of the, ways we do business are the right ways to do.
Right. Well, it's funny, too, when you look at things like, I saw a stat the other day that said that the oil and gas industry in this country has spent $2 billion fighting the efforts for renewable energy. And what's odd about that is, had they taken that $2 billion and invested it in renewable energy, think of the return that they would have had on that investment.
Sure.
Instead of sinking that cost into it's the way we've always done it and I have to stay with the way I've always done it, had they invested in renewable energy, they'd be leaders in a burgeoning industry. It boggles my mind how people can't think like that.
It does because, I see it, I think the way a lot of folks do. Number one, it's great for the environment, but number two, it's an economic engine.
Yeah.
This is a whole new industry that you can start up that's not going to pollute the air, not going to pollute your streams. So, to me, it's something that we really need to encourage. Right. We need to go forward on it.
And you know what? Whether climate change is real or not, reducing pollution and creating jobs and having a cleaner economy, is there a downside to that that I'm not aware of?
Beyond climate change, and I know the USA is producing more oil in the past, but there's still that foreign dependence. So, you could lessen that. You can, put that aside.
Sure. There's so much we can do.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't know why a lot of these places aren't getting out in front of it and trying to invest and be leaders in the area. other than I think that they've got so much capital invested in the infrastructure that they have, that they see it as just...
It's the sunk cost argument. I've already spent this money and
Yeah.
I can't get away from it.
Yes, yes, that's the only thing that I can see. And plus the fact that they've got a very favorable administration in Washington, now looking to give rebates or incentives to coal and nuclear, which, you know, I thought we had gone down that road, and I thought that that was in the rearview mirror.
Right. Well, it is. There's no more a war on coal today than there was a war on buggy whips when the automobile was invented.
Sure.
It's just we have a better way of doing things.
Yeah.
You know, you look at things like our increased use of natural gas. It's wonderful that at the tailpipe, natural gas is cleaner than coal, but on the other side of the fence, there's the leaks.
Yes.
Now, when natural gas leaks, methane is a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide by a factor of like 40. It's really, really bad. And so when natural gas leaks, we still have a problem. And that's why we really need to get to renewables. We really need to get to solar and wind and energy storage. Energy storage is taking off now.
That was the third component, the energy storage. And we did increase that in the House bill too.
Well, the SMART program that's coming up, that's replacing SREC 2 in the solar world, that SMART program is going to have energy storage incentives as well. And I'm really, really pleased by that. I attended a webinar the other day all about reducing demand charges with solar-powered batteries, with batteries that are charged by solar.
Yes.
Demand charges on a commercial account, I don't know if you're familiar with commercial billing for solar. You probably are through your work here in Milford, because I'm sure we have demand charges for some of our big energy users. But the demand charge is based on your highest usage half hour in a given month. Okay?
Yeah.
So a solar power system on your roof doesn't necessarily reduce your demand charge, because maybe your highest half hour happens at dusk or during the evening. All right. Or maybe your highest half hour takes place on a cloudy day.
Sure.
You know, that highest half hour is where that demand charge comes from, and they are considerable.
Sure.
So by using solar power to charge the batteries, you ameliorate that demand charge, you even that out, and the savings are dramatic. And so that's one of the things that we're really looking to branch into. They have these tractor-trailer-sized banks of batteries. You just drive it on the site, you park it, and now you've got batteries on site. Milford Hospital needs one. You know, there are various large electricity users in this, right here in this town, that could use that to you know, eliminate those demand charges, or at least smooth them out.
Well, that's what we were told in terms of the RPS. One of the reasons why you couldn't, you know, go higher faster is because of the storage capacity is just not there. So, I mean,
if you build it, they will come, right?
I think so. I think so.
So we're building it now.
I think so.
What it amounts to for me. We're really excited about that.
Yeah, and I guess what they would do, because I'm not on that went through the committee on telecommunications, energy, and utilities, or something like TEU. So I'm not on that committee, so I didn't get the benefit of hearing all of the ins and outs on that bill. But you know, we were told that you know, in today's world, to try to push it any faster, it's just not feasible. It's not practical. We don't have the storage capacity. We need to take this thing one bite at a time. So I mean, you know, like anything, I think you need to take positive steps, see where you're at, and take more positive steps after that. And hopefully we'll get us in the direction. It's not helping what's coming out of Washington. That's really, you know, counterproductive to. We're not on the same page. I think under the previous administration in Washington, you know, everybody was. You know, so that's a problem. But in Massachusetts, we just, you know, try to do what we can do.
Exactly. You guys also passed a couple of gun bills.
We did.
In this session.
Yeah, we did. After the horrible tragedy in Las Vegas, I believe we were the first state in the union to ban the bump stocks, which I had never heard of, and certainly not a lot of people did. In fact, even folks who you know, use guns and around guns a lot have no need for it, because I don't know that that's something that a hunter or someone who has, you know, lawful use of the gun would typically use.
If you're a hunter and you need more than 2 bullets, you're not very good at hunting. Honestly. You know, you don't need an AR-15 with a jungle clip and a crank handle that can allow you to just fire repeatedly.
Yeah. So I mean, I want to say I'm pretty sure that vote in the House was like 151 to 3,
Yeah.
or something. It was a very convincing vote. The Senate passed it, I believe, as overwhelmingly, and of course the governor signed it. So those are banned in Massachusetts. I think that was a very important step to take, an important message to get to our Commonwealth. That we want to be a leader in gun safety with gun laws that are sensible, and so that was one that got passed. And then later on, I think maybe after the Florida tragedy, it's just horrible that you have to think about these.
Yeah, in terms of which school shooting did cause this legislation. Yeah,
there was the big push for the extreme risk protection order, and that was a bill. Actually, the two bills very similar. Submitted by Representative David Linsky out of Natick and Rep. Margie Decker out of Cambridge. So the leadership went forward with the Decker bill, and there was a lot of interest on that. There was some degree of opposition to it. I got some emails from constituents. I answered all of them. Tried to address their concerns in terms of due process rights. I think there was some misinformation as to what the bill does and doesn't do. So I think when I was able to get some of that information out to people, they felt a little bit more comfortable with it. And I don't remember that vote, but I think that was a fairly strong vote also. I don't think it was as overwhelming as the bump stock, but it was a pretty fair vote, and of course it went through the Senate, and the governor signed it as well. So it's similar to the 209 restraining order that's in place. I know that there was some opposition saying that it doesn't make any accommodation for actual mental health help, or how you're going to handle someone who might be having a mental health issue. And the point that we had to make was number one, it was a gun licensing bill. Right.
It doesn't address mental health, and there's other programs available for people.
Well, that's the other thing, and in Massachusetts, we have Chapter 123, Section 12, so that if someone feels that a person is a danger to himself or others due to mental health issues, similarly, they can petition the court. The court has the person examined by a qualified psychologist, and then makes a recommendation, to the court, and then the court can order that person, up to 30 days evaluation. So, so that statute's in place, and a lot of people that I talked about weren't aware of that. So I said, these two, statutes can work hand in hand, because if there is a extreme risk protection order proceeding, there is language in there for mental health referral, and the judge could go forward with a Section 12 as part of that process.
Right, because he has those tools available to him.
You're all right there. So people weren't aware of that, and I think that was important, and also it was important for gun owners to realize that this was a full hearing. They're entitled to have counsel of their choice. They're entitled to present evidence, expert testimony. They're entitled to cross-examine, folks that are making these charges, and then it's ultimately up to the judge to make that determination whether or not the person is an extreme risk of danger to others, which is a fairly high standard.
It's a fairly high standard, and in a civil society, we need to be able to do those types of things. Another thing that's really near and dear to my heart, automatic voter registration. Great job, guys. Great job. What's his name? David Hogg, one of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school kids.
Oh, yes.
He made a point on Twitter the other day. I follow him on Twitter. I follow all of them. They're wonderful. But he made a point the other day of saying that if the government can automatically register me for the draft at the age of 18, they could also automatically register me to vote. And he's not wrong. absolutely we can and we should. And
Sure.
I'm really proud of Massachusetts for passing automatic voter registration. We're one of 19 states, I believe.
Is that what it is?
Now. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah.
The stats are.
I know, because every different statute, 15 states, 20, so
exactly.
it's tough to keep track of.
Well, when we pass rolling call, we'll be one of 4.
Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to that.
New Jersey has it, Colorado has it, one other state has it.
Yeah.
But to my mind, Massachusetts should be leading on things like this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, this was one that I signed on early as a co-sponsor. It's an important bill. The way it works right now, the 2 guaranteed agencies, the Registry of Motor Vehicles and Mass Health. Mass Health. So if you come in, involved with either of those 2, you'll get automatic registration. The statute does allow, I believe, the Secretary of State to authorize other entities as well to participate in that. So if you have contact with, I don't know, Department of Revenue or whatever it might be, so they can expand on it. But I think, again, in terms of getting things started, taking one step at a time, seeing how things get administered and don't. I mean, let's start with this.
Sure.
And
Sure.
get it going.
Yeah. If it needs a tweak down the road, well,
yes,
there's always tweaks available down the road.
Sure. You've got to get the process started. You've got to take one step at a time, or else nothing will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've seen people criticize you for.
Just one?
Just one.
Okay.
Well, one of the many.
One of the many, I know,
But one of the many that people talk about is early on in your career as a state rep, you signed on to a bill that would impose tolls on all of the state's highways rather than just the Mass Pike. And people criticize you for that, saying, oh my God, he wants to increase my tolls.
Right.
What's your response to that?
Yeah, so that was one of the bills that I filed, and it was in conjunction with the Metro West delegation, because that's been a big problem for us in central Massachusetts. The Central Mass driver and the Western Mass driver are really the only ones that are paying tolls, which is an entirely unfair and inequitable situation. So the Metro West delegation has been trying for years to get that equalized, to get some semblance of fairness. So there were a number of bills that were filed in terms of tolls, and one of the bills that I filed was to add tolls to other highways going into Boston. And when I went before the Committee on Transportation on it, I said, this is a purpose bill. The purpose is to show other representatives what we deal with every day. Okay, your constituents don't have to deal with tolls. We do. So the idea is, if you want to use tolling as a mechanism to fund transportation, okay, fine. It should be done fairly and equitably.
Across the state.
Across the state. And if you did that, that would reduce the amount of tolls that the Central Mass driver pays. The second part of
your constituency.
Yes.
Yes.
The second part of that argument, which a lot of these groups that are attacking me on, of course they didn't even address that issue. But the second part of the argument that I made before the Committee on Transportation, if the Commonwealth is not prepared to take that action, then all tolls should be removed.
Exactly.
So if you're not going to do it fairly, don't do it at all.
Exactly.
So unfortunately, the groups that are attacking me don't go to part 2. They just said,
they don't even go to part 1.
They want to put tolls out there. So I mean, to me, okay, we can not talk about it. We can just ignore it, and it's going to be status quo, and it's going to continue to hurt us.
Right.
Or we can take a bold step. We can get in their face and say, look, this is what we deal with. How would you like to deal with that?
Right.
Make it fair or take it down. So that's the approach on it, and again, I'm not the only one out there. The Metro West delegation has been wrestling with this for years. Central Massachusetts as well. These bills were sent to study because you see what a controversial item it is.
Sure.
No one wants to deal with it. When you try to deal with it and tackle it head on, you get attacked by these political interest groups, and people don't want to deal with that.
Right.
But I mean, I've been getting attacked for years for stands that I've taken. And when I see something wrong, when I see that we got to take action, I'm going to try and do something about it.
Absolutely, and that's the right thing to do.
And that's what we tried to do.
So let's. It's good to see that that we can get a positive answer out there. Unfortunately, you have to explain it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people say, when you're explaining, you're losing.
Right, right,
but you're absolutely right.
Right.
Yeah, if we're going to use tolls as a mechanism for funding our highways, then it should be fair. The Massachusetts.
And if you don't do it fair, don't do it at all.
Exactly.
Take them all down.
Well, the Turnpike Authority was first established in order to pay for the road, obviously.
Right.
And their mandate was that they would be in existence until such time as the road construction debt was paid. So, truth to tell, they really should have disappeared a long time ago, except that they continue to raise bond issues and stay in debt. And therefore stay in existence.
Sure.
And they're still doing that today, even though it's a lot easier now. I have a transponder in my car. I get on the pike. I get off the pike.
Yeah.
I don't even notice it, except once in a while they take $50 out of my checking account.
Right.
So,
right. I know. Yeah. It's a big issue.
Yeah. But with the transponders now, it'd be a whole lot easier to impose it on all highways.
Well, that was the thing. I mean, that, before it was the traffic and, the building the booths and all that stuff. So I guess that was, but now you don't have that issue. So it's very easy to equalize this and reduce the burden that we pay in Central Mass, help out the Central Mass driver.
Right.
And if you're not prepared to do that, then take them all down.
Right, because people coming into Boston from the South Shore, from the North Shore, et cetera, they don't pay them.
One segment of the state should not be shouldering the burden for transportation costs, and that's what's going on now, and that's what I want to try to address and stop.
Right. And doesn't some of the Turnpike money also pay for the big dig?
Well, it's kind of squishy, and that's another problem. That's a real problem with the. So the governor, has appointed a commission to study the future of transportation, and funding is a big issue. And I don't know how much he's going to want to deal with it at all. But we'll see what this commission comes out with in terms of a study. But it's something that I know the Metro West delegation is going to continue to try to look at, continue to try to bring equity, and I'm going to do what I can to try to help people in my district lower or eliminate tolls.
There you go. We got about 5 minutes left. So let's talk about single-payer health care. I know Jay Gonzalez running for governor. We're hoping that we can get some new leadership in the corner office this fall. He's in favor of Massachusetts instituting single-payer. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are something's got to be done with the healthcare system. That was one of the bills that we weren't able to get passed this year. The Senate passed a healthcare bill. The House passed a health care bill. Tremendously complicated, tremendously involved.
But Donald Trump said no one knew health care was this complex.
It's a very difficult industry to wrap your arms around.
Yep.
The Senate bill I'm not as familiar with. I think they kind of took from what I'm hearing, it was kind of a wait and see attitude and some different areas that they wanted to hold off on. The House, I think, hit it head on and tried to get assessments against insurance companies and large hospitals that would go into a community fund where, go into a trust fund for community hospitals like Milford Regional that are
one of the finest hospitals around.
Yes,
I think they're in the top 100, aren't they? Nationwide?
Yes, they're a great facility, but they don't have the affiliation like a Partners Healthcare and all of that. So they're kind of on their own. And there are other hospitals like that. Lawrence, I know, has one. So the fund would be there, I think, for 5 years, three or 5 years, I'm not sure. And it would be able to kind of stabilize some of the functions and expenses that these communities hospitals have, and kind of bring some kind, again, leveling the playing field, from some of the high-end money-making hospitals to these community hospitals, and kind of level that playing field. And there were a whole host of other provisions in the bill. The bottom line was the conference committee could not come to agreement on it, and that did not go forward. So that's going to be a huge item for the next legislative agenda. And I'm thinking, as more and more people look at it, the single payer is something to put on the table and take a look at it.
Yeah, well, single payer in Canada began in Alberta. It didn't begin nationwide in Canada. It began in Alberta. And it worked so well that they adopted it nationwide.
Yeah, I think it's got to be part of the mix. It's got to be something that's on the table. I mean, I think there are a lot of questions about it, but if you're looking at health care and you've got kind of two different versions in the legislature, and I think even the governor has a different take on it. That's got to be part of the mix.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that that's going to be a huge item in the next legislative agenda.
Yeah. We, before being in the solar industry, I was a software engineer for years.
Okay.
And I worked, when I first moved to Massachusetts back in 1993, I worked at Leahy Clinic, coding their systems. They have a homegrown billing system.
Okay.
And I am here to tell you, it is complex.
Sure.
Oh, the stuff, just from a perspective of diagnosis codes versus service performed. Someone comes in complaining of pain in their left arm. Do they have tennis elbow, or is he having a heart attack? Right? But at the end of the day, you don't treat his right knee. You treat his left arm.
Yeah,
and those
right.
are the. So, but,
Right.
but trying to track all of that in a computerized system built on a mainframe is no easy task.
And the problem with the healthcare system, and because I spoke to medical professionals, I spoke to some doctors while that bill was going through, and the insurance company is driving the bus.
Yeah.
The insurance companies are putting the squeeze on the patients in terms of deductibles and copays, and they're putting the squeeze on the medical personnel
staff,
in terms of reimbursements and direction.
Right.
Why are they there?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And
It really
not
should
only
be the
that,
relationship between the doctor and the patient, you know?
And there's so many of them that the
Yeah.
doctors end up employing massive amounts of office staff
Yes.
to maintain their billing practice.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, again, it gets to be ludicrous.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yep, yep.
Brian, I'm afraid we're out of time.
Okay, well.
That shot by in no time.
It did go
Thank you
fast.
so
Well,
much.
thank you for
coming
having
in.
me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, really appreciate
always
you
enjoy
being here.
talking to you.
Yeah, so we'll look forward to Election Day.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
So you've been watching All Politics is Local. All Politics is Local is a production of the Greater Blackstone Valley Democrats. For more information about the Greater Blackstone Valley Dems, feel free to visit our website at www.gbvdems.org. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and good night.